Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode with my continuing conversation with Jag. Jag, welcome back.
Tom, thanks for having me. What an eventful few weeks we've had.
What an eventful few weeks, few days. And
Phew.
what we want to do with our audience today, Jag, is we want to literally take some topics from the headlines, overlay that with the framework that the Department of Justice laid out for us in the 2024 update to the evaluation of corporate compliance programs, and see if there is either an answer or answers or a framework that compliance officers could begin to think about the responses to the rapid speed of change we have seen since January 20, when the new administration came in. And I want to start with two events, one from the weekend and one from Monday, at least when I found out about it. Over the weekend, the U.S. levied sanctions against Colombia for Colombia's alleged failure to take migrants back. And that was going to be a 25% tax or sanction, economic sanction on all goods coming into the United States. We're going to leave the political discussion of that completely out of this, but that was a sanction levied to take place effective Monday. The second was more of a business development, I would say, but perhaps other areas as well. And that was DeepSeek, a Chinese entry into the OpenAI competitive world, exploded on the scene with OpenAI that was many people called the equivalent or the equal of ChatGPT, and some said maybe even better. But the thing that got everyone's attention was the cost to develop, which was less than 1/10 of what it cost ChatGPT. And that got everyone's attention because everyone realized if this was true and correct, we could be opening up an entirely new front of cost-effective ChatGPTs. Obviously, it impacted ChatGPT, it impacted companies that invested in ChatGPT, and it impacted NVIDIA in multiple ways. So I wanted to use those two events, as disparate as they may seem, to really think through what we heard in the 2024 update from the DOJ. And the DOJ breaks their evaluation to three components. Number one, is a corporation program well designed? Number two, is the corporation's compliance program adequately resourced and empowered to function effectively? And three, does it work in practice? So let me start with number one, is it well designed? And Jag, what I saw in the 2020 update that's been carried forward and re-emphasized in the 2024 update was the topic of risk. How do you assess risk? When do you assess risk? What triggers do you have in place to start looking at risk? We were joking a little beforehand. Friday, I don't think either one of us or anyone else saw these risks we just articulated as risks that U.S. companies would have to deal with on Monday. But that's literally how fast things changed. And so I wanted to maybe start with the question of how, if a client came to you or a potential client, you were in discussions, how would you suggest they think about moving risk and risk management to a truly proactive approach?
Yeah, first, I just want to acknowledge that many of our colleagues and friends in the compliance community might be feeling overwhelmed. Just because the pace of change has been breathtaking, right? The Colombia sanctions, the sort of the 25% tariffs potentially going up to 50%. It's a change from the way the US sanctions worked, which was you had some time to plan and anticipate things, and this just happened out of the blue. And suddenly with DeepSeek, which is completely unrelated to policy, this was just a technological development. But the implication is much more stringent focus on export controls, especially for tech firms, right? Now, so the things are changing so quickly. It's completely unprecedented, right? It's just we've never seen this pace of change before. And the things about, if last week is an indicator, I think this will continue to be the case, and this will be the new normal, right? Things will continue to change as a technologist and a technology provider, what I'm thinking is, oh my God, when I sort of talk to a prospect, the question that I ask is, do you even have a handle on what your supply chains, right? What's the source of goods? How much of that data do you have? And then secondly, how much visibility do you have on your export controls, right? How much are you able to track your sales intermediaries, and how much are you able to vet them, and what controls are you able to apply on them? Tom, the first thing about corporate compliance is the corporation program design. These are two foundational things about a good program design, which is capturing the data, which is at a minimum, you need this data to even assess the impact on your organization, right? Otherwise, you're completely flying blind. So one is the program well designed, which basically foundation, you need data, you need controls, you need technology, and obviously, beyond that, you need talent, right? I think in assessing a prospects program, I think we first look at the foundational elements, and then which is data controls, and then we look at, okay, what is the level of automation that the client is willing to is able to sort of add to take away the burden, because the volume of changes and the volume of data that's coming out of it, it's just impossible for humans to parse through it.
Jack, you pointed out to me the concerns around technology companies involved in OpenAI and with ChatGPT or with Microsoft or any of those.
Yeah.
And we're going to pick on NVIDIA a little bit because they're the most in the news. And what really intrigued me was a point you brought up, which is shipment of chips to Singapore. Now, Singapore is one of America's best allies, certainly thought of as a business hub in the Far East. Government is one of the top and perceived to be not immune to corruption, but certainly very low corruption.
Absolutely.
A great place to do business and a great place for Americans and other Western companies to do business. But what does it mean if an extraordinarily large number of chips are shipped to Singapore, which is in the general geographic area of countries that are not perceived to be as high on the anti-corruption scale as Singapore? I almost thought of it in terms of the opioid crisis, where one doctor prescribed enough pills for the entire town for the year that he lived in. Is that now information that could be a red flag we need to start looking at? And two, how does a compliance officer get that visibility to even know, hey, something's got ticked or tripped and we need to take a deeper dive here?
Yeah, the revenue coming from Singapore, I think NVIDIA's revenue, I believe, increased by 400, I think, in year over year. So, which is astounding, right? Obviously, that would be something that NVIDIA will need to take a close look at, which are the companies that are buying from Singapore. And that's where export controls come in, right? Very tight export controls and sales intermediaries come in. Singapore now ranks as NVIDIA's fourth largest market globally. Singapore is a small country, right? It's what NVIDIA is saying is that a lot of companies are headquartered in Singapore. It's not actually Singapore. I mean, it doesn't even have any data centers, right, to account for so many NVIDIA chips. But I think this is where a compliance program and export controls program with tight data has to come in. And when news like this comes out, you can bet that regulators are also sort of clearly, closely watching it. What NVIDIA needs to do now is go deep into all the sort of the salespeople and sales intermediaries that are selling into Singapore and figuring out how sort of their background checks, figuring out where those companies, where those chips are going. And they will need complete visibility into exactly which data centers those chips are going to. And they might have to even develop some technology to track that in the future, which I'm not sure if they already have that. But so it's a huge concern. And when events like DeepSeek happen, these data points will come into spotlight, which is what happened now. And companies with very sort of mature compliance programs and great data would be in a position to answer that. You don't want to be caught flat-footed, which basically comes down to the second point that you mentioned, right, in terms of the 2024 guidance. Is the compliance program adequately resourced? And it's not just based on the company's total turnover, revenue, et cetera, size, right? It's based on other factors like national security risks. I don't even know how to account for the Colombian tariffs, right? That just came out of left field, right? There was no risk there. And suddenly, so yeah, I mean, you just need to be prepared for this level of volatility, and you need incredible data, incredible technology, and incredible talent and adequate resourcing.
And that really leads to the next area I wanted to explore with you in a little more detail, which is number two of the DOJ framework. Is this the corporation's compliance program adequately resourced and empowered to function effectively? 10 years ago, 5 years ago, the discussion, Jag, was around, do you have a competent or better CCO and talent in the compliance function? Number one. Number two, did they have reporting visibility to the appropriate persons, whether that be a board of directors, audit committee, whether it be board of directors, whether that be the CEO, or did they have to go through the general counsel who could veto them? But now I think we're moving to the third part, which is the technology component. And frankly, I don't think no matter how good an FCPA or even compliance expert you are, in 2025, you can manage a large multinational without an effective data program. And I was wondering, maybe get your thoughts on that and how you would help a client or a potential client, how you would educate them on this new reality.
Yeah. So often when we look at large compliance programs, what we find is that there are some tools in place, but then there are also pockets of non-compliance, right? Where, I mean, we focus more on third-party compliance. So there are pockets of third parties that are not adequately vetted based on the potential risk from those third parties. In terms of resourcing and the way we approach those clients is one, before we get engaged, typically we guide the compliance teams there in creating a sort of a vision and a roadmap for where they want to get to and how that would create value for the company. For example, this could be something very tactical, saying, okay, we would basically bring all these non-compliant third parties into compliance. These are the controls required, et cetera, et cetera. This is how we would tackle all new sales intermediaries, and this is how we'll tackle all the past. So we basically create a sort of a vision, roadmap, and a fairly tactical plan. And that then enables our clients to go typically to the board to get funding, because these programs have to be adequately resourced, both with technology and with people. And then we also, especially in this climate, and any climate is important, but in a slightly tighter climate that we operated in last year, tighter sort of budgetary climate that we operated in last year, we also talked about business impact. So for example, we walked through how much is the business impacted by slow onboarding of a sales intermediary, right? And then you sort of scale that up. Or how much is your business impacted by slow onboarding? So this is beyond, of course, the compliance fines and reputational impact and all the other negative stuff, right? Once you put that all together, the ROI, the roadmap, the vision, then it does become something very exciting, and the company the entire organization can actually go behind it. That's typically, yeah.
The most intriguing thing I heard you say was actually something you didn't say. You didn't talk about compliance risk. You didn't talk about an FCPA violation. You talked about business risk and ROI and profitability. And that's where I think compliance has evolved, that they can make a substantive difference by doing exactly what compliance has traditionally done, but with the tools of data analytics can see proactively and then anticipate and hopefully respond to events to help keep a company at least competitive. So
Yeah.
I thought that was great.
It's more and more, Tom. Most of the ROI sort of packets, the proposals that are being sent to the CEO now have to contain something about business impact. In addition to, yes, we failed an audit, in addition to here are the risks, etc. It has to, because compliance functions do impact business, right? This could be the difference. I mean, in addition to like faster onboarding, this could be the difference between being able to make a decision faster, whether they can increase shipments to a country or move to a more cost-effective provider. Otherwise, you're frozen. Right? You can't make those decisions without an effective and dynamic compliance program. But yeah, I think our most mature clients, if you will, with most mature programs, are fully tracking business impact of compliance programs. So they're tracking both things, which I love, right? This is this is the percentage of entities we screened, and this is how much faster we were able to move. And as a result of reducing cycle time by, let's say, 2 weeks, as a result of that, we were able to sell more in this territory, right? So they're tracking all that. It's so interesting that clients are also tracking stories, which is basically what makes all this memorable, Tom. So I remember a client recently telling me a story that the client traveled to a country in Asia, and his Asian counterpart said, "There's something wrong with this new system that you put in place, CERTA. It's as soon as I put in a sales intermediary, I got an approval back. I don't think it's working." And my client was just who was in the global head office compliance, was smiling because that's the way it's supposed to work. It is not supposed to take, weeks and weeks for especially for low risk entities. You're supposed to instantly do the checks and get the feedback instantly. I thought that was such a great story where someone in this country thought that it was broken, but the client was so proud that it's working exactly and the way they'd like it to. So I thought that was a great story. We shared it across the entire company as well.
That should be celebrated. But that really leads to the third general category, at least the way the DOJ has broken out the ECCP, and that's number 3. Does the corporation's compliance program work in practice? And Jag, here the 2024 update mandates data-driven evidence to assess the effectiveness of your compliance program. I certainly hope Cerna's clients understand this, but are you having to still educate clients on this, or is this really moved to, Jag, I need to do this, how can you help me?
We're not having to educate the clients on program effectiveness and tracking program effectiveness, but it's a really hard thing to do, Tom. It's like, I think clients often come to us saying, how do other companies do this? And a lot of it, Tom, is reporting, right? So by reporting, these are the controls that have been applied to these set of third parties, if you will, and every single third party, based on sort of the risks that they could be subject to, are assessed in these ways, right? So it's basic. One is data. The second thing that I've seen clients do more of is capture evidence of program effectiveness beyond the aggregate data, but in spot sort of evidence, if you will, right? So taking pictures of posters, it's capturing these stories, video stories, etc., of people. And that is as effective, especially with a regulator, because it shows real life evidence, right? Tangible evidence beyond the numbers. And the third thing that clients are doing is tracking the discussion of the controls that are meant to meet the regulatory guidelines. Because obviously clients go through this process of, okay, we got to put these controls and then these controls, and there are trade-offs involved in that. And making part of that journey transparent to auditors, to regulators, that this is sort of the decision making that was involved in putting these controls in place to meet these regulatory guidelines, I think has been extremely powerful, especially to show the commitment to regulators that we're truly investing in this program. So it's numbers, it's sort of spot evidence, if you will, or real world evidence. And then third is capturing the narrative of how these compliance programs are being developed and why these controls are being in place and how it can meet these guidelines. Typically, sort of talk to clients about all three and guide and handhold the clients in putting at least the first two in place. The third one is largely not done within CERTA, but we can provide some best practices and connect them to other clients who do a great job with this.
Once again, Jag, you used a phrase that really struck me, and that's create a narrative. And I love the beauty of that because that's what a regulator is going to want. They want a narrative backed up by data.
Yes.
And that when you can present a story to the regulators, should they come knocking, backed up with that data, that's exactly what they're looking for. And you'll be able to sustain any investigation, whether it's simply an investigation or if something had gone wrong and you need to demonstrate the effectiveness of your overall compliance program. But that same narrative can be told to a variety of stakeholders, employees, third parties, boards of directors, your shareholders. It's a very compelling way to think about data and the use of data.
And thanks, Tom. Yes, I think it's the most comprehensive way to run a compliance operation. These are the decisions that we've taken to put these controls in place. And this is the data that we're using to track effectiveness of those controls and how comprehensive those controls are. And then here's some additional evidence and stories, right? That basically just prove that this data it's not like nobody would make that up. I mean, but it's just sort of putting a little bit more tangible proof sort of beyond the aggregate numbers. So it does create a very good narrative. But I mean, many of our clients, I'll just share a quick story, which I was very, very proud of. One of my clients, it's a Fortune 100 firm. And every single year, they had to go in front of their sort of board and CEO to get additional funding, additional budget. And the chief compliance officer is I think he's a visionary. I really, really enjoy talking to him. He took a call and basically created a 5-year roadmap. And he says, this is where the company needs to be in 5 years. And I'm not going to go and seek budget every year. I'm going to get budget for 5 years. And he did it. And otherwise, it's so much of the time and bandwidth of the compliance team is just taken in convincing people and getting budgets. And sometimes humans just get tired and then start making compromises. I really love that this chief compliance officer created the roadmap, showed the ROI, showed the risks. And the CEO of the company comes from a sales background. So truly showed the impact on sales based on the compliance program because he knew the language that the CEO would understand and was able to get all the budget that he needed, which in this sort of budgetary climate is very admirable.
Jag, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but I will say I was a little skeptical we could answer the questions we posed at the start of this podcast about sanctions and tariffs in Colombia and DeepSeek. But by using the 2024 update to the evaluation of corporate compliance programs, but you have convinced me we can. I have learned a lot.
I always learn a lot, Tom, talking to you. It's a pleasure. And thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.
Where should our listeners go for more information about CERTA?
Yeah, the company website is CERTA, CERTA, CERTA.ai. And feel free to email me. I'm JAG, short for Jaguar or Jagmeet. So jag@certa.ai.
Jag, thanks so much. I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thanks, Tom.